Hi, in this video I'd like to look at the fourth sheet, ArrayList, Delegation and Custom Class. Now this is where you might find some of the concepts get a little bit more challenging, shall we say. Okay, the very first thing to do is take this rather long class name, deliberately named for reasons I'll explain later, and then you need to copy and paste the content of it into your IntelliJ. So let's go back to IntelliJ, go to source, create new Java and give it that name, hit enter. So you then have the shell for your class. Let's go back and grab the interior structure of it. And interestingly, this has all the get sets built into it, but as an earlier video indicated, you could literally copy that in and use IntelliJ's get set methods to generate a lot of this other stuff, but it's all here for you in this instance. So let's just copy and paste it in. Have a quick glance, make sure that there's no it's not happy about something has been underlined. Let's see if we can just find the source of that. Here we go. There is a dot, should be a semicolon. Often in IntelliJ, down this bar here, you'll notice yellow highlights. If you do have an error, let's just put the error back so you can see what I'm saying. See this little red line there? Sometimes it's difficult to spot, but often if you scroll up and down on the scroll bar, you'll notice there'll be a red, there'll be orange. The red, you can click on it and it'll take you to the issue that's the typo in your code. So this is another really useful feature of IntelliJ. Okay, so we have a class called Generic API Transport Delegate. A delegate class is a class that you pass to take responsibilities. So if you create your own class and you don't want to repeat all this code, one mechanism is to turn this into an object of your class and pass it all the stuff you need it to do, right? The reason the letters API appear is this is a very common practice with application programming interfaces. You pass it, you create your methods which just simply create a shell or a wrapping around these methods, and you get this class to do all the work for you. That's what this set of exercises are all about. So let's go back to the sheet. We copy that in, and the first exercise is they want us to create a car class. The car class wraps the functionality of this, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate this, and I am going to, interestingly enough, well, we'll have to write this out, but notice the member variable is from that API class, the delegate class, and that's the name of it. Deliberately chosen just to reinforce the concept, not chosen to confuse you. It's got a constructor, you pass it the fuel capacity and seats, and notice that it passes it in to the constructor of this generic API object inside the class. So actually it's going to do all the work for me. If I want the fuel, I ask the API class, give me your fuel. If I want the fuel capacity, you have to work out what to do here. If I want to set the fuel, I set it inside there. So this is a very thin layer on top of this API class. So what you should understand is that when you get into more sophisticated coding, you will be using other classes to delegate the work, take responsibility if you like. So let's get on and build that. So if I want to create a car, so I'm going to do new Java and I'm going to call it car. And into my car, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a reference. I'm going to just cheat by just copying the name, and I'm going to create my member variable GAPI. Okay, as I said, to reinforce the idea that this car class is just sitting and wrapping it. Okay, so notice if I ask IntelliJ to create a constructor, it will just pass the whole variable as a parameter. That's not quite what I want, because if you look, I have to break down the elements. I need a double fuel capacity and seats inside my car. So I need a double fuel, mistyped, double fuel capacity, and the third one was the number of seats, and it's an integer. Okay, so that's actually what I'm going to pass. So what I need to do is I call the constructor, I build a constructor from the member variable. So I say GAPI equals new, and there is my constructor opening up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, bear with me a second, I'm going to just shift it down a bit, because what you find is when you have a lot of data to pass in, you can spill it over several lines. It's null, the organization. Notice that helpfully it's telling me what that is. 0 is the next value, which is the transport ID. 0 is the next value, which is the number of customers. I pass it the fuel, which corresponds to the fuel. Should do in a second. We have fuel capacity. And finally, I think we have seats. I think that's right. Okay, so let's just spill this over a couple of lines. So the presentation of it has a very interesting, and visually it's much easier to make sense of, right? The fuel on a separate line. You notice it doesn't tell you that it's fuel. Let's get rid of that line. So essentially, look at this bracket here and the close of that bracket, which is here. So one line of code, because I'm working in Java and not in Python, I can split it over several different lines. Don't want those shifted up, and want them all level. So let's just level it up, right? So you shift tab back and then tab across, and that should do you. Okay, so that's our constructor done, right? So let's come out after our constructor, and then we'll build our set and our get methods. So you'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm going to just stick to part of it for the sake of this, the seats, and I'm going to create the constructor. So let's just do the set the seats and get the seats. So what I'm going to do is cheat. If I go over to here, we have available seats. There should be a get set in here somewhere that I can pinch. There we go. So I'm going to pinch that from there, and I'm going to just edit it inside here. Right, it's not called available seats in this class. It is actually not this, it is GAPI, and it is the get seats call for the GAPI. Okay, then I also want to set seats, so let's just type it up. It's just as fast. It's a void because I'm setting it. Seats, I'm going to pass it a integer seats value and open up this. Then I'm going to say to the GAPI, where's the method gone? Where are you? GAPI, hit dot. I'm going to call set seats on there, and I'm going to pass it the seats. Right. So this get seats simply calls that. This one wraps that. You might think, what's the point of that? Well, actually, I've just created a car which only requires 3 pieces of information. The organization ID, the transport ID, and customers are all irrelevant here. So they're all set in the constructor to 0. This gives me a lightweight class that 90% of its work is done by another class. Critical element. Let's go and test it. So if we go over here, we don't have to write generic API and create an object out of that and go through that. And this is the other reason I've used such a long name. I'm going to call it my car, and I'm going to say new car, and the first value is the fuel, let's say 34. The second is the fuel capacity, let's say 456, and the last, the seats, let's say 4. Okay, it's I don't know what these values mean. Now here I am in my client code creating a new car, and I can set and I can get values from it, whereas this API class is this really long-winded name. So part of the trick of using a long-winded name was to make you realize that by wrapping it with a simple class, a lightweight class which I call car, and it just wraps all the functionality of the API class, it's much simpler. So in the test, I just create my class, I get my system.out.println, and into there I'm going to say something like seats, and in here I'm going to put an and I'm going to say my car get seats. And we should know that get seats inside car simply calls the API, because it's just a layer wrapping the generic. This is called delegation. So let's just run it, just check it works. Always run it, always do a simple test. There we go, 4 seats, that's what you expect. Because I tied it, if I change that to 5 and ran it again. Always do these simple tests because it helps reinforce the concept. So that's it. That's the core concept here of delegation. You have a pre-existing class which has tons of functionality, and then you use it. Now, to finish, think back to your Python. In your Python, you used a graphics module, a graphics class. And essentially, when you worked with it, it did all the work for you in the background. These are similar kinds of ideas, and in object-oriented programming, very, very powerful.